On that note, right, well, I'll introduce you properly. For those people who are joining, I'm sure we'll get a few more people joining over the course of the next few minutes or so. So you're welcome to back to the leadership and strategy stage or track. I'm really delighted to be joined by David Hayes of the Marketing Practice and Connor Douglas of Microsoft. David and Connor have been talking on the subject of revenue and reputation, building a strong, short and long game. It's an intriguing title. I'm looking forward to learning more. So please ask questions in the comments tab, and I'll be back in about 25 minutes time to answer them. Over to you guys.
Thank you. Let me get the screen share up and going. Okay. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate you tuning in, and I hope you've been enjoying the B2B Ignite conference so far, be it remotely and virtually, as opposed to in person like we're all looking forward to. But alas, the show must go on. Thank you for that kind introduction, Joel. My name is David Hayes. I'm from the Marketing Practice. We're a global integrated B2B agency with offices around the world. I'm be it a Brit, I actually live up in the Pacific Northwest in the US, in Seattle, and I'm joined by Connor Douglas from Microsoft. So very excited to talk with you guys today. The topic that we wanted to talk about was this notion of revenue and reputation, and I think while that is not a new subject, I think it will be very familiar and relevant to a lot of the challenges and opportunities that many of us are facing today as modern marketers. The theme of today is around how, ultimately, when we think about these two attributes of marketing and what businesses expect of us, what should we be thinking about when we think about a strong short game and a long game in service of that? As we all know, the life and role of a modern day CMO and marketing leader is more challenging than ever. But with that comes a lot of opportunity. Gone are the days where marketing is purely a marketing function. Marketing leaders now, it's ultimately a growth role. It's about integrating the business. It's about having an operations hat, having a finance background, having a technology acumen to be able to make sure you're harnessing the best of the organization in service of the best customer experience. Ultimately, marketing has become business enablement. And I think with that, there's some fascinating opportunities, and what we want to do, and through our partnerships as an agency and our work with Microsoft, is help share some of the insights that we've had, both personally and professionally, working with some of the biggest brands out in the market and the leaders that are running these shows, and also share some insights from directly from Connor and his work over at Microsoft, because I think they've been doing a pretty darn good job when we think about the themes that we'll talk to today.
Yeah, excited to be here.
So with that, I think like any good background from marketing perspective, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just anecdotal from our experiences that we have working with brands. Each year, the Marketing Practice commissions a survey where we ask, in the region of 600 plus B2B marketing leaders around the globe for their input and feedback around, what are they seeing as trends that are helping them succeed? Where are the challenges they're facing? And one of the key data points which we'll use as a reference as we talk through today is like, what is it that outstanding marketers stands them apart? So we asked them, the question of outstanding marketers are those who stated they have outperformed their competition over the last 2 years. So you'll see that theme throughout is kind of looking at, what is it that stands the outperformers from the rest? The first thing that, one of the main consistent points we see across the board, and this isn't new, but it's certainly very prevalent at the moment, is the importance of having a strong long game. And I think the tension that, as a marketing leader you face is ultimately the pressures of the business to make sure that we are focusing on short-term returns, but we're also building the brand. We're also looking at the longer-term picture for how we grow as an organization. So I think it's understandable that having that long view is important when it comes to growth. And we've seen that from the study over the past couple of years. We're seeing that the trend that outstanding marketers are 2 times more likely to invest more than 60% of their budget in long-term goals, to run campaigns for more than 6 months, to measure campaigns for more than 6 months, and to partner with their agencies and vendors for more than 2 years, which I think is ultimately, when we think about that, I think it's then the case of, well, what strategies are they employing when they think about these long-term programs that they're creating? What is it that where they're focusing their efforts? And the first point we wanted to talk through is about building distinctiveness and how the role distinctiveness plays in effective marketing. I think, as we think about the context of this, to define distinctiveness, there is this pure differentiation, which is as an organization with a product portfolio and service offering, how differentiated is it from your competition? Now, of course, naturally, that is a very streamlined way to stand out in the market. But I think as we're seeing the trend of more commoditization in B2B and technology, brands are really looking for different strategies for how they can stand out, particularly when they look at the long term. So when we think about distinctiveness and we look at what's influencing the B2B buyer, and we see it, from a statistical perspective, even in B2B, which is frankly, surprising, is that 46% are still making decisions based on emotional kind of brand engagements. But of course, naturally, that's paired with 54% looking at it from very rational decision making. These are big investments that impact both their organizations and their customers and their careers. So with that balance, it's ultimately about where should a brand invest when they think about their long-term strategy? Is it in brand building or is it in demand generation? And I think it's easy to say with what a close split it is that if you're putting 50% of your budget towards each of these, then you're probably doing okay. But I think the reality is that it actually takes both. It takes both brand emotional and demand rational thinking and campaign messaging to help really connect that experience for your customers. And reputation, it really sits squarely in the middle of that. Ultimately, I think for a lot of B2B brands, when they think about brand building and brand campaigns, it can often come across as, well, we need to have a brand campaign in market to make sure that we're getting awareness out. And I think that's sometimes been very disconnected from a lot of the demand generation activities that might be going on. I think ultimately it's about how do we connect those together in a way that enables our messaging to be distinctive. And reputation is a way that we're seeing that as an opportunity to connect the two. This comes from having a brand and a messaging platform that is based on strong values, that's purpose driven. I think we're seeing as more and more of our buyers are becoming millennials. A point of differentiation comes from having a distinct proposition, and that sometimes is about thinking about the brand beyond purely just the product and how we can stand that apart. It's also about distinctive and consistent communications across the funnel being. Think about our activities from awareness through to demand gen, making sure that reputation, that brand message is coming across consistently. And I think it's easy to then start to point to, well, surely this is a creative problem. We need to make sure our creative is strong. But we're actually seeing from our recent study that creative isn't necessarily, in its traditional sense, enough to drive effectiveness. With there not being enough to separate leaders from the rest. When we asked them, how creative is your brand activation on a scale of 1 to 5, we're seeing, whether it be people who don't rate it to be particularly creative to very creative, there isn't much standing the outstanding marketers outside from the rest. But I think what's interesting with this is, I think that speaks back to the last point that as the market has become more commoditized, it's easy to say, well, if we get an agency to come in with a big creative brand execution for us to get our message into market, that's going to be enough to help stand us apart. But I think the reality is, if it isn't grounded in something more meaningful than some smart creative messaging, it's not going to be enough. And I think that's where we see the opportunity for reputation building to help be that real distinctive differentiator when it comes to standing out for a long-term activation. So, and we've seen this from other stats within the study, with leaders who feel confident in their differentiated position are almost twice as likely to succeed. And I think that's where, if we look at, as I said, the opportunity for it to be beyond looking at product differentiation in our messaging or competitive campaigning, really focusing on building that reputation as a creative brand platform to enable the business to flourish and your campaigns to flourish, to reach audiences in a way that both connects the emotional part of their buying experience and also the rationale. So the next part is around, it's all well and good building that brand reputation, spending the time with the C-suite as a marketing leader and the broader marketing team, helping build out what that new brand messaging platform is. But if ultimately we're not able to then connect that to revenue, we've failed. So the next part of this is around, once you have invested that time and you've created that new value proposition, that new brand platform that's going to help be your reputation builder going forward, where should you be applying that to actually start to drive that revenue? And I think that's where, when we think about brand marketing, I think brand marketing in its traditional sense, like the brand campaign is dead, long live the brand campaign. It's not that we're necessarily saying brand campaigning is not going to work anymore because we now need to connect it to demand. What we're saying is I think there's opportunities for the leaders right now to redefine how they think about brand marketing, the idea of brand generation, where we're taking that reputation messaging that, perhaps traditionally we put more focus and emphasis in at our top of funnel activities around awareness, but looking at different programs and tactics to help get that brand messaging across in a much more targeted way. And we've seen that from some of the statistics which have come back in this latest report this year. Outstanding marketers are 25% more likely to micro-segment their campaigns. We're seeing them 25% more likely to invest in account-based marketing. And I think what this speaks to is, particularly for B2B, our interactions with our customers both need to happen at a brand awareness level, so that we're making sure that we're showing up in the market, whether it be through our traditional out of home or whether it be through some broader above the line or digital media. But we also need to connect that down and make sure that reputation is really coming across in very focused micro-segmented campaigning. ABM is a great example of this. I think a brand like ServiceNow is doing a phenomenal job right now in their efforts to both connect and deliver a very meaningful reputation message in market at an awareness level to help establish their position as an innovator in the field. But they're also creating a world-class ABM program, which is helping them get that message across at a very tactical level to the lives and organizations that they can speak to at a much more personal level. And if you do this, I think one of the things we've seen from our experience working with brands where we've been doing reputation building to then inform programs is that it actually acts as an amazing catalyst to energize the sales team by making the role of marketing and establishing the reputation platform. It's an opportunity for the marketing leaders to build that relationship at a business level with the CEO and the broader team. And I think that's where we see creating great alignment between sales and the marketing team, where sales is ultimately getting the value and to benefit from the efforts being invested from marketing and the broader business in enablement of their sales engagements. So like we said at the start, it isn't just about building a strong long game, because I think these programs like ABM, like partner marketing, we're seeing that them yielding great results for customers and our clients, to help them stay ahead, to help build that real strong foundation for them to build, particularly during these times. But at the same time, quarterly earnings calls are still what we live and die by when it comes to bottom line impact as a marketing organization. So we're also seeing the importance of pairing the long game with that short game. And I think we're seeing some trends here emerge when it comes to what a nimble short game looks like. Part of that is around the trend of a lot of organizations adapting agile practices and methodologies, not just in their development practice or departments, which I think a lot of us would be more familiar with when it comes to agile methodology, but really bringing that mindset of Scrum to how we actually operate campaign. We're seeing the ones that are winning are learning fast. They're the marketers who are spending, they're a third more likely to capture insight regularly to improve business performance. And Agile is a really great way to rally your teams around growth, to kind of get them very focused around iterative cycles to make sure that we're being really efficient with our spend, We're able to optimize our messaging to make sure it's very targeted and pointed. And we're seeing that, ultimately help grow the team and that culture that can flourish across the marketing team. Now, to go with that, I think the other thing we're seeing, which is these organizations who are building out these agile practices and making test and learn embedded into everything that they do from a marketing perspective, we're seeing that opportunity to combine that reputation that they're establishing as part of their long-term programs. They're combining that with the insights that they're garnering from their short-term approach and their agile culture that they're building around how to actually operationalize these. And then they're having to solve for the next piece, which ultimately is where the short game and long game comes together. And that is when you add in scale to the equation. We're seeing a lot of organizations start to adopt this mindset of building out a center of excellence around global demand centers, where we're taking that agile methodology and we're doing it at scale through automating processes. We're creating focus around what demand generation looks like and connecting it both to how we think about ABM, how we look at partner enablement, how we think about the broader impact that we can make as an organization with our campaigns through the line. And finally, point number 3 here is about connecting the business. The theme I think you're seeing emerge here is that while most successful marketing leaders are able to wear multiple hats, their superpowers are really about the ability to connect the business by unifying them around core skill sets that live ultimately within marketing. And right at the center of that is ultimately about the understanding of the customer. I think marketing, ultimately is that common thread connecting all parties in service of the customer. And I think that's where the best are ultimately building and establishing their credibility, not just within marketing, but with the C-suite, the CEO, and it's enabling them to build those relationships across their C-suite peers, as well as also with their cross-functional teams that then sit within that. So you have to have a strong relationship game and a set of relationships based on value. And I think a lot of that is around up-leveling the impact and enablement that marketing and the marketing function can bring to the broader organization. And we've seen that from this year's study as well, and that those that are investing in their cross-functional relationships, outstanding marketers are 2 times more likely to have those strong relationships across their C-suite peers as well as the teams that they're working with. The thing that's interesting is that we are seeing this year that the stats around the difference between outstanding and others is that there is a trend across the board that we are seeing integration improving, which, whether it be from people who feel like they, still have got some work to go to ones who are feeling more established in that process. The thing is, it's still standing the outstanding marketers apart is that in that last mile, the service survey participants that we've worked with, the ones who are still rating themselves as a 5, there's still a pretty big opportunity there for the others to play catch up. But I think ultimately that relationship and investment in those relationships is what is standing those outstanding marketers apart. So when we bring that together, starting with a strong long game, the importance of building out a nimble short game in support of that, and connecting the business, some of the attributes we're seeing right now as a really effective way for organizations to connect their reputation and to their revenue. And with that, I think, a brand that is doing this, better than most is Microsoft. And that's where I'd like to invite Connor to come speak and share his experiences with the Microsoft Surface program and that side of the organization that has effectively been able to leverage its reputation to help drive bottom line revenue impact across the organization while connecting it.
David, thanks for sharing those insights. Super valuable. And I'm thinking in the background about how that's so true at Microsoft in so many ways. But thanks for having me, everybody. Nice to meet you. I'm Connor Douglas. I'm a product marketing manager at Microsoft on the Surface team. I look after our commercial US business, specifically our go-to-market strategy with our channel partners who resell Surface and Microsoft products. And as I look at, we have our mission statement here. It's funny, Dave, you're talking about reputation, and it's something that our executives talk a lot about is we don't want to look cool at Microsoft. We want our customers to look cool. So just interesting kind of building on what you're talking about. But if you can move to the next slide, please. Working at Microsoft, there's so many different product areas, and it's been really helpful as a field marketer to understand how do we think about the strategy of Surface. We think about Azure, Dynamics, LinkedIn, Xbox, and these are really the three pillars that our executives share with us as field marketers about how to think about Surface when we're launching marketing programs and campaigns. And those are the three pillars are the following. One, it's about driving innovation in the device space. So how do we change the way we interact with our devices? So it's less about the device, but what we're doing with the device. Two, it's, we are a cloud-first company. How can our services light up Teams, Note, Azure, all of our different cloud applications? And finally, it's about how do we help our customers be more productive with the best hardware and software mix? And I share this with you because these were the pillars that we used when we thought through the strategy behind the Surface Modern Deployment Program, which I'm here to talk to you about today. This is something that we partnered with the marketing practice on very closely. And really what this program is about at a high level is training our partner ecosystem on a new go-to-market method, which is zero-touch deployment. Oh, and if you can go back, sorry, really quickly, let me just explain what zero-touch deployment is. And thanks, David. I know got some transitions in here. So many of you may have never thought about what happens when you're an employee at a new company and you have to get a laptop. I never had. But what happens is your company has to buy the device through a Microsoft partner who gets that device, takes it out of the box, puts a USB stick in there, is entering in passwords, changing the background, all these security permissions and settings, reboxing it, sending it to the customer who then gets it to the end employee. Highly manual, time-consuming process. And especially with this work from home environment, harder to do with all that manual touching of the device. And so what zero-touch deployment allows us to do is send a device directly from the Microsoft distribution center to the end user in a remote setting and do all that security settings and configurations in the cloud. So you think about this zero-touch solution, you think about driving innovation, how this is a whole new way of going to market for our partners. You think about lighting up the cloud. This is all about how you leverage our cloud applications to deploy devices. And you think about the productivity gains from this new model. So, with this zero-touch deployment, we saw a huge opportunity to really to embrace this and evangelize this with our partners. So now you can, next slide, please. Based off of this big bet on zero-touch deployment, the marketing practice and the Microsoft team sat down and built out a comprehensive go-to-market program for our partners. And so we have a team of 3 dedicated partner solution specialists at TMP who work one-to-one with our partners to train them. I think we have 8 modules in total that train these partners on the technical, sales, support, and marketing aspects of zero-touch deployment. And in the last year and a half, we've had over 200 partners successfully graduate from the program. And as a benefit to these partners, we've partnered again with TMP and put together marketing campaigns that they can then send out to their customers about Surface and Zero Touch to help generate demand for them. So really been a successful program. And I want to tie it now to the points that David just made. So he talks a lot about the long game. And with Zero Touch deployment, something I didn't mention is that this software solution is available to Microsoft's hardware partners, not just Surface. So HP, Lenovo, Dell. And in the short term, you may be thinking, hey, if we're training partners how to do this, they can just go do that with a different device. But if you think about the longer term implications of driving partner satisfaction, improving the customer experience, and driving more Microsoft Cloud consumption, it was a no-brainer. We could rise all boats together. It's not a us or them situation. You then think about, you mentioned the nimble short game. TMP does a great job of working with us on providing feedback from our partners, from the partner solution specialist team. We have a Power BI dashboard that we look at on a weekly basis to track performance. But one example of this is we actually invested in a marketing tool to let our partners share those campaigns out with their customers. And pretty quickly, it was apparent to TMP and to us that there were some issues with that tool. And so to TMP's credit, they found a separate marketing tool that was being used by our Azure coworkers. Within a month, we decided this tool made more sense. We migrated all of our campaigns, all of our partners to this new tool, and it's actually live as of today. It's been like a crazy past month. But just an example of how you have to be willing to adapt the program and react and understand feedback. And then finally, the business aspect. We think of product marketers at Microsoft as really being business leaders in a lot of ways, as David mentioned. And so we've actually tied the partners' training performance back to revenue and integrated our Microsoft CRM to understand how our partners that go through this program performing from a revenue perspective. We've also closely partnered with several teams within the organization. So we work with the Microsoft Cloud product team on the training materials, with our partner development managers on making sure the partners, this is landing with them, and actually with our worldwide marketing team as well. They're taking this program, not just in the US, but worldwide with TMP. So, I think, David, your points really rang true for this program, and we're excited. We're actually in the planning phases for the next fiscal year, on the next 12 months, of how to continue evangelizing Zero Touch through SMBP with TMP. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Connor. And I think the point I want to make as well, in terms of to Microsoft's credit with Connor, is that I think it's a great example of, as I was talking about earlier, like how do you create distinctiveness in the market? I think it's an example of kind of creative problem solving in the kind of non-traditional sense, to help leverage Microsoft's reputation and commitment to help further their business forward, but ultimately through focusing on the customer. So that if if Microsoft Surface is in a position where they're talking to an audience or a group that is potentially interested, their commitment to making deployment easy is a real point of differentiation through a distinctive proposition, as opposed to it being purely about a creative campaign to help best land Y Surface.
So David, I need to ask you to wrap up now, if that's okay. Are you quite close to a point where you can do that?
Yeah. No, that concludes our presentation.
Well, that's beautifully timed by my part. It was as if I knew you were going to do it. I'm sorry to have to step in a little bit, but I'm getting gently nudged by my colleagues backstage.
No, not at all.
But so great presentation. I mean, fascinating to understand the kind of nature of the. I know that TMP did a lot of great thought leadership and got a great insight, and you're a unique agency in many ways in terms of how you operate and the nature of your relationships. I was going to ask Connor, I mean, do you work with, I know that TMP and Microsoft have got quite a long-standing for quite a number of years now. I mean, is that typical of the agency relationships you have, or is this is this unique in some ways as to how the tenure and the style and the manner of the relationship?
I would say there's a handful of agencies that have long-standing relationships with Microsoft, TMP being one of them. So I would say it's a select few that have that longer standing. We obviously prefer to work on a longer-term basis with agencies, but if it's not working pretty quickly, you have to make the right business decision. But TMP, I would say, has been a longer-term, a stellar partner of ours.
You kind of wind up making a short-term decision about a long-term relationship because you can tell it's not going to go in that direction, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of slightly counterintuitive, but I know exactly what you're saying. Richard Evans has asked a question. He says, for Connor, how did zero-touch deployment impact on your partner's revenue since it bypasses the setup step they are performing? I'm wondering if there's any resistance from your partners around that issue and how your team navigated it. It's a very, very good question. What do you think?
It's a great question. So there's two answers. We have found that partners who complete the program, their Surface revenue is actually growing faster. So they're having more success selling Surface. So that's one part. The second part is the services. And yes, they are now losing we call it imaging, more traditional services of that manual setup. But what we're coaching them on with TMP's help is think about repositioning yourselves as a cloud deployment service partner and actually turning on new revenue streams in terms of fully deploying and managing the device via the cloud, which ends up being a higher margin revenue stream because you no longer have that labor intensive manual work. So that's how we're positioning it. Yes, we have that opposition, absolutely, because a lot of these partners have invested in massive warehouses built just to image devices, but we're seeing a lot of newer, more forward-thinking partners embrace this model, and we think longer term that's where the market's going.
And I know that talking channel marketing is so fascinating because it's one thing to move your own marketing into a new era, but to have to move everybody or this kind or some channel partners, and some of whom some are very sophisticated, some are very not sophisticated. You've only scratched the surface of the challenges you've gone through. So it's a conversation for another time. But thank you for kind of even alluding to it. I appreciate giving us a snapshot of it. I mean, just a question for David. You talked about the benefits of thinking long term, the benefits of reputation. They all make perfect sense. I guess the problem is that not everybody either is willing to or able to think about reputation. I mean, there's a lot of kind of short termism in marketing, whether we like it or not. I mean, how do you get around that? Is it possible to get around that? Can you convince people to do the right thing, or is it you just got to respond to what it is they want to do and what their priorities are?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the brands that we've worked with where we've seen them have success with this, is that a focus around reputation and the investment in that, it ultimately can't be something that lives purely within marketing. Like, it has to be a business-wide investment. And I think that's where we've seen the ones who have managed to do it effectively, they've had that CEO buy-in. So it isn't kind of pigeonholed into a brand initiative. It is ultimately around like, how do we want to show up more broadly in the market? And I think part of this is the trend, to the point around commoditization and creating distinctiveness, is that it even comes down to, how does these technology brands, like, how are they attracting the best talent when it comes to recruiting? So I think also looking at how, the reputation, focusing around building your reputation and that platform, it becomes an enablement vehicle for not just marketing, but also like HR for the sales team. And I think it's around like creating that common investment at that level, at the C level, that seems to be the only way, frankly, that you can make it work.
Yeah, I completely believe that. But if you can get all those people in harmony together, I can imagine it's tremendously powerful. So, David and Connor, we have to leave it there, unfortunately. It's a fascinating topic, and there's lots. As I say, only scratched the surface of it. Thank you so much for talking so eloquently and candidly about what you've done. And I hope you can join us for the last couple of sessions of the day. For you, it's very early. For us, it's less so over here. But thank you for your contribution today. We're going to take a break now for coffee and anything else that you need to do in 15 minutes. We're going to come back for the final session in the leadership and strategy track, which is from Heike Newman of Oracle and Jim Grinny of 90 Octane, and they're going to talk about how trust can help you navigate the now and plan for the future. Very prescient topic. And then we're going to go into a closing keynote, which is Carla Johnson. So please hang around for that. And we're going to have some drinks afterwards, if you're still awake, and it's dubious whether I will be, but I'll do my best.
Thank you all.
Good time. See you. I hope. Cheers.